Dear students, today I will deal with the fourth model of writing, that is cultural. As you know that we have already covered three models of writing: body, language and psychology. So let me tell you that unless you go through this fourth model of writing, your reading of the three models of writing is incomplete, because body, language, psychology, it is encompassed under this cultural model of writing. At the end of the day, ultimately woman is a cultural construction, and when she is a cultural construction, then only gender is not important, only gendrical duties and gendrical descriptions or the gendrical differences are not important in terms of the model of writing. So when you are talking about model of writing, you should focus on the cultural model. So the kind of culture, the kind of concept we nurture regarding body, language and psychology. So entirely or largely what we notice that in all over the world, the culture was hegemonic in nature. That means it was dominated by men. So in general we notice that women reproductive organ or women body, it was considered inferior, or it was not designated equal to men. So we derive conclusion after Lacan, Freud and Bloom and many other literary models that we approached in from the side of men. What do we notice? That it is anti-women, or in one or another way they have declared women inferior. So I mean to say here that the concept of body that comes out in all over the world regarding female, it is from the culture, and culture is occupied not only by male and female but many other people. So first thing, that body is determined, the concept of body is determined by our culture. The concept of language, it is also regulated by culture. So the kind of culture, kind of language and kind of psychology comes into existence, as I have already discussed separately on them. So I would like to combine here the idea that culture encompasses or culture includes in its territory the above discussed three models, and the reason is that they are composed out of the cultural developments or cultural thought process. So when we are talking about model of writing, and suppose that the model of writing is limited to psychology, till the difference of psychology, that means writing is gendrical in nature or it is gender specific. So as you know that when feminist criticism started, and from the very beginning women, they were trying to develop the separatist culture, and the result was that the gendrical notion was very dominant, and gender specific writing, that means men, they were ousted from the world of the women, right? So this has happened already, and till 1970s women were writing through this concept. But in 1980s there is arrival of the gender theory, and gender theory allows not only inclusion of men in the world of female but other minority discourses. They are also given entrance in the domain of the feminist writing. So when a woman is writing, she is not only different in terms of a male, rather she can be different in many other terms, and those differences culture here compiles, or culture here encompasses in its whole discussion. So when a woman is writing, she is undoubtedly different than men, but at the same time she may belong to a race, she may belong to a nationality, she may have a national identity, she may have ethnic community, she may have many such other differences. For example, if a woman is writing, she may belong to elite class or lower class, she may belong to, on the basis of caste, to the subaltern group, that means of SC, ST or of the privileged caste, as here the caste segregation or the distinction is done. So and at the same time she is, if belonging to India, then India was a colonized nation. So it is a developing country or developed country. So if a woman is writing, then apart from this male and female difference, apart from this gendrical difference, many other differences are included, because woman is a cultural construction, and when you look after culture in the making of woman, the significant difference is not only of the gender, rather of nation, ethnicity, race, caste, class, psychology and all above things which we have already discussed. So I hope this very idea is clear to you, that why I have given emphasis over this very explanation that woman is a cultural construction, and cultural construction, that means inclusion of all other differences apart from these gendrical differences. So when we are limited to gender difference of women in terms of writing, that means we are limited till 3 models. But when we are trying to encompass or include in women's writing theory other differences, that means we are including cultural differences. So culture is a very wide term and it incorporates many other differences, not only gendrical differences. Now when we move ahead and we try to cover up the whole discourse that has taken place here in the this cultural model of writing, what do we notice? That despite all these differences, one very significant point here emerges out of the cultural model of Ellen Showalter, and that is the idea of the collective sisterhood or collective womanhood. Now this collective sisterhood is what? That a woman, when you look to the culture of woman, or you just look at the term woman, so women from Western society, women from Eastern society, women from Afro-American world, from African society. So that means if you look at the geographical territory, so many differences you may trace, and on the basis of this geographical territory, you may understand the economy of those countries, right? The countries to which these ladies are belonging. So meaning to say that many such differences are persisting among women itself, right? Among women, many such differences. But Showalter unites all the women under gynokidsism on the basis of one unique sameness, and this unique sameness is the typical female experience. It is the specific women experience, and these experiences can be described like the activity of mothering. So a woman who is black, who is white, who is rich, who is poor, who is bourgeois, who is proletariat, many such dichotomies you apply, many such distinctions you apply in this group of women itself, but they all are having this power of mothering, and this activity of mothering unites them. So in a way, Showalter here highlights the specific sexual life cycle of women and this power of reproductive organ, metaphorically, which unites women, not metaphorically but directly. The experiences can be united. In literature, metaphorically they are united on the basis of this unique experiences. Now when we move ahead and we try to look at the other talks that is available to us in this women's writing and culture, then what do we notice? That before moving ahead, just I recalled one example which I would like to give here, that if you take a writer from Indian society and her name is Kamala Das, that means Showalter is a Western woman, and we are if we have to apply this idea on a concept, on a poem, on the writing of a woman writer who is from Eastern Wall, especially from our country. So we may say that to great extent this cultural concept, this cultural idea is applicable, but not all the ideas of cultural concept is applicable to Kamala Das. But as far as this collective womanhood notion is concerned, we may see that there is a poem that Kamala Das writes entitled Maggots, right? The maggots, you know, it's a kind of small insect. So she here brings into existence a mythical woman, and we are having knowledge of the Indian mythology, so we know Radha and Krishna, and Radha is a mythical woman. So in that poem, what happens that Radha is meeting for the last time with her lover Krishna, and Radha is now to get married with her husband, and what happens that the last meeting with Krishna and the same day marriage takes place, and the same means the same day, that means the same night she is with her husband, and there she talks that what it creates impact over a maggot if the crops need. That means if somebody is declared as a dead body, it doesn't matter that you are covering him under one bucket mud or under one truck mud, right? So meaning to say that here the common experience which Kamala Das has traced with a mythical woman, it is very much true to all these women who are in the love condition like Radha. Meaning to say that a woman who is in mythology and all the women who are in this mortal world, they can be united together on the basis of their experiences. In the same way, Showalter says that many such happenings, apart from all the differences, unite these women. I just gave an example, and in one another poem she writes, I am sinner, I am saint. So that I is not the I of Kamala Das but the collective I. So collective sisterhood example I just quoted here. Now moving ahead, Showalter has incorporated in her article those cultural diagrams or the diagrams provided by anthropologists to trace the actual situation of women in the culture. Because if the model of writing is culture, then how to know the diagram of women, right? So for that matter, she goes to sociologists and anthropologists and historiographers, historical models available to us. So the result or conclusion that comes out that first, before 19th century, there were no such clear-cut diagrams specific to women by the anthropologists and by the historians. That means whatever was of men, it was automatically considered of women, right? So that means a specific culture or a specific domain, a specific discourse was not created for women before late 18th century by anthropologists or by historians or these cultural researchers, right? So she has quoted Gerda Lerner, and she said that for the first time in the early 19th century, Gerda Lerner, who is an anthropologist, has given emphasis over this idea that there should be a separate female culture where feminine experiences must come into the limelight, right? So if we have to understand the concept of the cultural diagram, then I will try to here show by drawing the diagram in terms of circles, and which is quoted also by Ellen Showalter. So first diagram I am drawing here, that was existing before 19th century. So if you may notice this particular diagram, and this diagram was existing before 19th century, you may see that X is completely dominated by Y, right? So that means there was no such concept of the culture which could be separated from the dominant male society. So complete dominance of men over the female, over the women's sphere. So this was before 19th century. Now let me draw the another diagram, and that talks about women's sphere. Then I will give explanation. So after first diagram, I am coming to the second diagram. In the late 18th century or in the late 19th century, this particular diagram was drawn, and you may see that how historians and researchers, those who were oriented towards the good of the female or those who were concerned for the development of the women, they had drawn this separate culture of male and female, complete separate group. Now I am going to explain about this particular diagram that is drawn here separately. So what happens that in late 18th and 19th century, women's sphere concept was existing. And what happens in women's sphere, that out of the complete dominance of the men, women, they were so feeling suffocated that when they started making paradigm of the women life, they thought that better not to have any kind of interaction with men, right? So they have given emphasis, the 19th century anthropologists and 19th century female researchers, they have given emphasis over the separatist culture. So if I have to quote here example of this separatist culture, to whom I may take here, I may take here Virginia Woolf. As Virginia Woolf has talked about a room of one's own, and this room of one's own is not only a space for women, a separate space for women for living and for writing. Rather, this room of one's own is metaphorically a creative space, and it is a space through which only women, they may have escape from the hostile male world, or they may save themselves from the animosity or from the treacherous activities of the men. So in a way, the entire room of one's own of Virginia Woolf, it does advocacy for developing what? Separatist culture. And in this separatist culture, she says that this room is a space, metaphorically and literally both. Living in that room, women, they may develop their economy and their literary genres also, and their literary writings also. They can flourish living in this room. Why? The reason is that the world that is occupied by men and women both, and women, they live in the world occupied by men, they tolerate vicious nature of male. They tolerate the hostility of men. So women, they should not confront this animosity, anger, rage, hostility of men. And the solution which Virginia Woolf gives, she says that women should develop separate culture. But the problem that comes out of the separate culture, that it ultimately results into an utopian idea. Why it results into an utopian idea? Because how far and how long women and men, they may live from each other separately. That means life is not possible in separation, and it is too difficult for women than men to develop entirely new world. So Showalter declares this idea as utopian idea, and at the same time you develop in your mind the graph of women culture in 19th century or in late 18th century. Now I am going to draw another cultural diagram, and that is by Edwin and Shirley and Edwin Ardener. So Showalter quotes two Oxford anthropologists, and these two Oxford anthropologists named Shirley and Edwin Ardener, they have given cultural diagram of men and women. And what happens in this diagram, see carefully. Now I am going to draw third one. Now this third diagram that is drawn here, you may see that in this diagram, overlapping sphere, that means if this one is the x, this one is the x, and this one is y, so y is completely, almost completely, not 100%, has dominated the sphere that was of women. That means in this third one, that is by contemporary Oxford anthropologists Shirley and Ardener, what happens that the sphere that was of women, it was almost 95% or you say 90% dominated by men, right? So the sphere is overlapping. But if you look at closely, there is crescent area in the women zone, right? If you just closely see the diagram, this diagram is given in your essay Feminist Criticism in the Wilderness also. So if you just closely pay attention to Ardener and Shirley diagram, in the women's zone, there is crescent area visible, and that crescent area is called as wild zone, right? This crescent area is called as wild zone. And now what happens in wild zone, I will explain here. So first, keep in your mind diagram where women, they are most of the time, large number of their circle is dominated by men. Just crescent area is visible, that is neither of male nor of female, right? And but it comes, or it is shown in that diagram of Shirley and Ardener in the circle of women. In the circle of females it is shown. So how it is interpreted by feminist writers, and in this way how we can understand the cultural situation of women and what are the future possibilities. So now I explain here. So the third diagram that is given by Ardener and Shirley, in this diagram one is dominant and another is mute. Undoubtedly there is no need of explanation. Dominant, that means male group, and mute group, that means women group. So it always happens that dominant always overpowers the weaker one, and here weaker one is nobody else but women. So Shirley and Ardener, what they argue, they say that in both the groups, in both the circles, that means of male and female, they have their language, they have their ideologies, they have their visions and experiences and perspectives. Mind it, in both the groups, that means in male sphere also and in female sphere also, there is ideology of male in the male sphere, and in the female sphere also there is ideology of female and all the perspectives and vision and desire and wishes. But what happens when one is mute and another is dominant? Then the ideologies and behavior and the pattern of life which is taken as universal and normal pattern of behavior, it's of dominant group. So here Shirley and Ardiner, they sound like Marxist theories, Marxist concept, that what happens that ideology is of everyone. Ideology, that means your interest, your philosophy, your attitude towards life, your concept of life, your vision, your whole soul lifestyle can be summed up, your whole understanding can be summed up into ideology, philosophy can be summed up. So generally ideology of the bourgeois is taken as ideology of the proletariat, or it is universal ideology applicable to each and everyone, to women, to homos, to lower class, to the in terms of caste, and in many other minority discourses are there. So those minority discourses are not matter of concern for the dominant class, those who are bourgeois, and their ideology is taken as normal ideology. Same thing Ardiner and Shirley, they have here explained, and they say that women, they are also having their opinion and their perspective, and men they are also having, but this circle, sphere of the women, 90% it is dominated by men. So whatever we find from the side of men, it is of from the side of women, it is of men. So in this case, women culture is not at all existing, and if it is existing, it is of overlapping nature. But the hope of the feminist writers in this diagram of Edwin Ardiner, it is in that crescent area, it is in this area that is visible, and this half moon-like space which is visible in the zone of females, and this zone they are calling as wild zone. Now feminists have interpreted this wild zone as typically feminine space. Let me make clear that by Ardiner and Shirley, it is declared space of no one, neither of male nor of female, right? This wild zone is explained by anthropologists of no one, but these feminists have interpreted that this wild zone, which is no man's land, it can be typical, it can have possibility of the typical feminine expression, and in this way wild zone can be called as a specific female zone where men they are not allowed. So women, they are having this opportunity that they can go into the domain of men, but men they are not allowed to come into the wild zone. So sometimes when we read Showalter, we keep on talking like, "Arey, ye wild zone talk." A wild zone talk, that means a specific female talk. So here Showalter quotes Sixou, Laugh of the Medusa, and Whitting's, there is one another feminist writer from the French world. Her name is Whitting, and her one work is quoted there, and they are talking about white ink there. Now let me explain this possibility of white ink in the crescent area that is visible in the female sphere, and that can be described here as wild zone. This white ink is the possibility of female expression. In the background there is dark continent, so dark color. So you know that women in all over the in all other models and in other lectures of that I have given on Showalter, I always mention that how Freud has declared women as dark continent, or many such male figures, they have declared women as dark zone, dark area. So something that is dark can only highlight the white. So you know that white is having its value only when there is in the background black. So whenever you write on the board and either board is of green color or of black color, only then white ink is highlighted, right? So these female writers, they say that in this wild zone, in this typical feminine, this wild zone can be declared as the typical female space, and where women, they may declare to themselves as white ink in place of black ink. Why black ink? Because they were declared from the very beginning as the dark continent or dark space or inexplorable, right? So they say that we may have from top to bottom in this crescent area light zone, and that light zone will be typically feminine light, where men, they will not have any entrance. So different feminist writers, they come and they express their hope that perhaps by making use of the wild zone, we may create female language, and French feminists are especially interested in that. Okay, so suppose that if semiotic gets established of Kristeva, that means wild zone will be established, because in the semiotic zone there is no scope for men. And I hope that you are getting semiotic, because I have already explained this semiotic in other lectures, where child is having indistinguishable unity with mother, complete mother's land, no father's entry. Now, I hope you have got these areas and this cultural diagram. And now what Showalter says regarding this wild zone, whether she gives acceptance for this wild zone or she rejects wild zone. Showalter denies this possibility of totally feminine structure. Why she denies? That once again, just like Virginia Woolf, we are going to have an utopian description in terms of wild zone. As Virginia Woolf demanded a room of one's own, and she said that by separating ourselves from the vicious hostile world of the male, we may have our own theory, our own creativity, and this is how she gives androgynous vision. In the same way, this feminine zone, which will be typically female space and no men will be allowed there, that means again a separatist culture will be developed. However, description comes a bit differently, because it is a space neither of male nor of female. Then female, they are thinking that we can develop our activities there, so we should occupy that space, otherwise perhaps men will occupy into that zone also. So it is a kind of diagram through which the whole discourse is going on. But Showalter denies the possibility of totally feminine structure, because a woman is a cultural construction. Because when you take birth, there is not only mother in the family, but father is also there. When you grow up in your family, there is not only your father and there is not only your mother and grandmother, but father and brother also, grandfather, father and brother also. That means process of socialization which takes place. In this process of socialization, there is role of the parents, both the parents, right? That means writing can never be single voiced discourse. And suppose if the sanction will be given to the wild zone writing, that means so Walter gives here sanction to one voiced discourse. But no, she denies here to give sanction to wild zone discourse, and she says that the reason is that woman is a cultural construction and writing is always double voiced discourse, right? Two, dia in nature, double voiced discourse, because either male child or female child, whenever there is birth of a child, its role is of both the sexes, that means of father and mother both. So how can you talk about development of literary culture on the basis of mothers? Virginia Woolf writes that female, they should think back through their mothers. But how can we think back through our mothers? Are we not having memories of our fathers? Because the moment we were in the growing age, we are having over our psychology impact of our father also, of all the male members. So how can we think only through the mothers? Right? So here once again Showalter attacks on all those female critics and female writers who have done advocacy for developing separate zone in the name of separate area of female in the name of wild zone, and she says that she once again discards here Virginia Woolf's notion of developing androgynous vision and also of separatist culture, and she says that it is an utopian idea and it is not at all possible, because writing takes place always inside and outside the tradition. It is not only inside the tradition, rather it is every time outside the tradition. So feminine writing is a double voice discourse. It cannot be totally feminine structure, rather both the types of structures are coming here, and I should here extend my discourse that not only both the structures male and female should come, rather many other structures should come in the writing, and this is how true gender theory takes place. So I here just move ahead, and now I will talk about gender theory. That gynokitsism, which is by adopting this cultural model is now not dogmatic in nature. It encompasses in its territory not only male but many other minorities under gynokidsism. Whereas if you look at the journey of gynokidsism, it started with typical female experiences. If you go back to my second lecture or third lecture, I think in second and third lecture both, I have given this emphasis that there is a circle of writing. And this circle of writing, that is from writer, female writer to female character to female reader. That means in the early phase, gynokidsism was feminine in nature. But slowly and gradually, with the development of gender theory of 1980s, where gender theory is not limited to the heterosexuals, rather it incorporates homosexuals, not only homosexuals but Dalit, subalterns, all the minority discourses, they come under gender theory and they are given equal platform with the process of deconstruction. And in this case, when gynocritical stance is the stance of gender theory, the question is here, what about the basic philosophy of gynokidsism? Because the problem with which this discourse started, it was a coherent theoretical model. And if gender theory is now the final stance of gynokidsism, then what has happened here of coherent theoretical model? Because if you talk about coherent theoretical model, your position is fixed. You are not going to be oscillating in your stance as a critique. But here when you incorporate male also, to Dalit also, to caste system also, to race, to nation, to ethnicity, to each and everyone you have given allowance in your gynocritical zone by this cultural domain, by this cultural description, then what about that basic philosophy of writing, basic premises of writing? So Showalter here answers that it becomes mandatory to incorporate all the minority discourses because woman is not a different product of different image of the culture, rather she is also contributing equally in constituting the culture, right? Her contribution is equal like all other factors, so she is one of the factors. Then first and foremost, women should not be ousted from this general culture, the culture that is occupied by many people, either dominant or mute, right? Either superior or inferior. So women should be there. And another thing, Showalter says that these cultural models, they are just diagram to diagnose the situation of women. They are not models to they are not models to decide theories. Once again, I repeat here the question which I have raised, and I raised here question that the problem comes apparently when you talk about gender theory, that when gynocritical stance of writing is gender theory of 1980s, then what about the coherent theoretical model earlier which was dependent upon unique female experiences? Then Showalter says that these models, these cultural models, especially of Edwin and Ardener, which she has included here, it is a diagram to diagnose the situation of women. It is not a diagram to write according to this particular thing, right? It is conclusion is that Ardener and Searle model is not replacement of the white fathers like Lacka, Bloom and Machre. Rather, feminist writers, while writing, they should make use of the cultural and social theories in order to know that what women have written, how they were, rather than what ought to write. So, Showalter at the end of her article, she mentions this, that there is no such theory which can be substitute of the essential subject matter of women. Meaning to say that women specific experiences or the basic premises with which this essay started, it is right now also same. The only thing that the images, metaphors, plot, the entire the factors responsible for development of the plot, for constituting the plot, all the literary cultures, they are not only motherly in nature but fatherly in nature. So in this case, cultural model becomes important, and here we may say that gynokidsism includes in its zone all other differences, and in this way it is a way to look at women, and it is a way to create canon. Gynocriticism creates a female canon. Here gynocriticism tries to stand up in comparison to female literature. So now people should not only talk about men's literature but also about women's literature, that women's literature which is product of the same culture of which this male literature is. So this is about your feminist criticism in the wilderness. In case of any doubt, your questions are welcome. Thank you.